Hello and welcome to another standard video. Today we're checking out this green-white Lifegain aggro deck with the additions from Marvel Superheroes. This is basically an updated version of the mono-white Lifegain deck that I've featured a few times on the channel, but now we also get to play with Tigra, Feline Fury, a 2-mana 2-1 with Flash and Trample, and whenever we gain life we get to put a +1/+1 counter on it, so the typical Ajani's Pridemate ability. We also have one copy of the original left over, and then a bunch more creatures with a similar ability. Essence Channeler also gets to move its +1 counters onto another creature when it dies, and if we lost life in our turn, it also gains Flying and Vigilance, which we can also easily enable with Starting Town. And then there's Leonardo, which is a lifelinker with that same ability, and can also maybe sneak it into play. Another reason to play green is for the new Heroic Feast, an enchantment, saying when it enters we get to make a food token, and whenever we gain life we get to choose up to that many targeted creatures, and they all get one +1/+1 counter. So this is especially powerful with life-linking creatures on the battlefield, so maybe on turn 3 we can already play the Feast, gain life, and immediately get some extra +1/+1 counters. Heroic Feast is also quite synergistic with Halia, since the food token entering the battlefield also gains us a life, since Halia triggers not only of creatures entering but also artifacts, and then if we've gained 3 or more we also get to draw a card end of turn. Halia can also be warped for 1 mana if we need a cheap Lifegain enabler. And speaking of Lifegain enablers, Virulent Emissary is another reward for going into green as a 1/1 Death Toucher that gains us a life whenever another creature enters under our control. We also have the Hinterland Sanctifier in white, and then a single copy of Aunt May as another 0/2 creature with that same ability, but it is a legendary, so we really don't want to draw a second copy usually. And then the Rune Lurker Bat is an actual flying lifelinker, so this one is especially synergistic with the Heroic Feast, so we can enable it right away, and then putting additional +1 counters on a lifelinking flyer is another great way to keep the Heroic Feast going, to give our entire team additional +1 counters going forward. Then we also have a single copy of Case of the Uneaten Feast, which can be nice against control decks as a way to maybe replay our creatures out of the graveyard if we solve the case first, and it still can enable our Lifegain synergies early on, of course. And then we mentioned all our 2-mana creatures, also have the full set of Sheltered by Ghosts as our only real interaction, but it is incredibly powerful here as it can also give our creatures lifelink, so that's another great way to enable the Heroic Feast. Of course, can also sack the food token at some point to gain 3 life and give 3 of our creatures a single +1/+1 counter. And then we also get to maybe high roll some opening hands with a Leyline of Hope. If it's in our opener, it starts in play. This will enhance the amount of life we gain going forward by 1, so now a single life turns into 2 life gained, which is also quite nice with the Heroic Feast, as we can now give 2 creatures a +1/+1 counter, and once we get to 27 or more life, our team gets +2/+2, so that's a nice way to quickly get the game over with. And then the mana base wants to have enough basic lands to enable the Hushwood Verge to also make white mana in case we need to double spell some white 1-drops. And then a Gathering Place, a new dual land, also wants to have a basic land to enable it going forward. And then we also have Temple Garden and the aforementioned Starting Town. So yeah, that's our deck. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Okay, we're on the play with a keepable hand. 4 lands is maybe a bit on the high side, but we'll try and make it work. So turn 2 Sanctifier Halia, can immediately draw a card. Opponent on the mono-white Aura deck. Alright, could also look into sneaking Leonardo. Opponent may accept the trade for Sanctifier, so then I don't get to sneak. Could also just cast Leonardo for 2 mana. So, again, quite a few options. But let's just go Sanctifier, Warp Halia. Get some cards flowing. And then I'm not super interested in trading, even though our opponent's gonna start stacking auras on top of the Survivor. For now, Scavenger. Into a Seam Rip. Alright, that was a good turn. Exile Sanctifier. Take 3. So now Halia no longer draws a card right away. Tigra's an interesting draw. Yeah, let's maybe set up Tigra. Small chance I can catch them off guard. But opponent's gonna know something's up since we didn't just play Halia. Another Seam Rip. It's gonna force the issue on Tigra. Had I played Leonardo, they probably would have exiled that instead. And now a Spellbook Vendor. So, yeah, opponents answering our enablers. So now we might struggle to get some of our synergies going. Can still play Halia. Could also sneak Leonardo if they don't trade for Tigra. Going Halia, tap land still seems fine. I guess now if I attack and try and sneak Leonardo, it's more likely to work. And then I would get to enable Halia as well. Yeah, let's try it actually. And draw a replacement copy. A card like Shelter by Ghosts on either side is gonna be quite swingy and potentially determine how this game progresses. Spellbook Vendor, pretty nice with a Scavenger here. They could also be keeping up a Shard Mage's Rescue, which threatens 2+1 counters, so that explains the Vendor attack. Yeah, no blocks. Okay, more Halias. So may as well just play Channeler and Tigra before attacking. And then just Leonardo wants to attack. We do have Starting Town to give Channeler Flying and Vigilance. Opponent double blocks. Okay, still gonna play Tigra. Opponent will get to trade. But that's alright. So there's a Shard Mage's Rescue. They can put the counter elsewhere, since they already have 5 power. Yeah, they should have put it somewhere else. And then we get another Lifegain trigger. Halia will draw end of turn. So, don't hate how this game is progressing. Another Leonardo's a good draw. But as I've said, something like a Sheltered by Ghosts could still turn the game around. Opponent had another Vendor. 1 card remains. If they're tapping out, presumably they don't have another Shard Mage's Rescue. Or they just decided that they can't afford to wait. Heroic Feast is a pretty nice one here. So I can go Feast plus Leonardo, and I kind of like enabling the flying as well here. The food token is an artifact which triggers Halia, so we can keep growing our team. Yeah, I can just go for the Channeler, but yeah, we could also start splitting it up a little bit. And our opponent has seen enough. Awesome. On to the next one. Alright, we're on the play. Missing a 1-drop. We do have double Sheltered by Ghosts. So there could be matchups where this lines up pretty well. There will be matchups against removal heavy decks where this is pretty bad. I'll try it out. And then Starting Town, a way to give Channeler Flying as well. Turn 1 Swamp. I think we start with Leonardo, because at least Channeler has a chance of picking up some +1 counters, and then moving those onto another creature if it gets answered. Momentum Breaker answers Leonardo. And I guess we'll start with a Feast. So yeah, Sheltered by Ghosts not looking particularly strong here. Petrified Hamlets to shut off a land. Good name like Air Temple, Restless Prairie also makes sense, the green-white creature land. And Annex, so kind of a demon control deck. Leyline's the draw. I mean, at some point I'll have to run out a creature, but Channeler's not looking great here. I may need it to go with Sheltered by Ghosts to answer like a demon token. Bandit's Talon makes me discard. And a Saboteur. Sanctifier was reasonable. At least we can double spell. Counters on both Channeler and Sanctifier, thanks to the extra life from Leyline. Opponent does make a demon token. Alright, so Sheltered by Ghosts looks decent here. And Halia, a good draw as well. So Channeler will fly, Warp Halia. And then Sheltered by Ghost, a demon on Channeler. And then no point in growing Halia since she's warped. But I can now attack with both creatures. And we'll get the bonus from Leyline after gaining another 10. And then I don't have 10 creatures to put counters onto. I do get to draw a card. Alright, so we answered the opponent's board. They need to now deal with the Channeler. And we've got some more creatures to deploy. And our opponent scoops it up. Wow, I'll take it. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw with a keepable hand. We have 2 Verges that only make green at the moment. So white mana could be a bottleneck, meaning I might want to start with Sanctifier. Now with Temple Garden it doesn't matter. So yeah, still fine with a Sanctifier on 1, facing the Prowess deck here. So they will have some cheap burn spells, a reason to maybe set up our Lifegain enablers before playing Tigra so it can immediately get out of range. Although the Slick Shot is also a good target for a card like Sheltered by Ghosts. So, a couple options. Don't hate flashing in Tigra end of turn. Or I can go Emissary plus Halia, which will draw a card as well. And then next turn I could just play Halia. Another Sanctifier, so now going 1-drop plus a 2-drop could also line up. If all my creatures are alive, Tigra can immediately get 3+1 counters, which is pretty nice. Although now double Slick Shot. Also makes it less likely that they have a bunch of cheap non-creature spells in hand to enable them. For now, Felonious Rage. So this is likely the fling builds with Callous Sellsword to fling their Slick Shots at us. So we've got options. Going Sanctifier into Tigra is quite appealing. Could also play the Rune Lurker back to have a flying blocker for the Slick Shot. Shelter by Ghost is going to be a lot better if I can put it on Tigra, as like a larger creature that can keep growing. Feels pretty low impact on my current creatures, plus they could still get removed by like a Burst Lightning if our opponent pays a ward. So yeah, I think I'm going Sanctifier plus Tigra. And we can play Tigra at instant speed to maybe throw off their math. And hopefully I don't get punished for it. They've got 1 card in hand, so maybe just leveling up a talent here. Could try and ambush the other token. They seem to have a non-creature spell in hand if they're attacking into the Sanctifier. Yeah, I'll just take it. Right, no spells here, so it could have been a bluff. Opponent levels up the talent. And now Tigra is safe, and the Shelter by Ghost is looking a lot better. Talent only has one option. And Shelter by Ghosts is likely good enough here. Gonna go for a Slick Shot, even though it's tempting to just exile a token for good. And get some more +1 counters, and they're not removing Tigra with a burn spell. Would have to be a bounce spell at this point. We're back up to 25, so the Slick Shot plan is likely not going to work, and our opponent scoops it up. On to the next one. Alright, we're on the draw with a keepable hand. 1 mana Enabler into some 2 mana payoffs. Facing turn 1 Forest. Channeler has Starting Town to gain flying. Turn 2 Cub is always scary. But yeah, I think I like Channeler, so we can maybe take to the skies if the board stalls out a bit. And then Heroic Feasts, also looking good with a bat, being able to gain life right away. A double Cub opener, so could be dead next turn. And a Bramble Familiar. Cub attacks. Pretty happy to trade here. Put the counter on a Ruin Lurker. Okay, so maybe still have a chance. So that one, do we like Heroic Feast or an extra creature? Probably an extra creature, make it another Channeler. Yeah, Feast is better if you have multiple creatures in play that can all get extra +1 counters. So we'll see what our opponent has to offer. A Smuggler Surprise. They've got 2 cards in hand. And it's double Craterhoof Behemoth, wow. Well, this was pretty ridiculous. So they didn't even need the second Cub. Alright, GG's. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw with a very promising hand with a double Leyline opener. With turn 1 Sanctifier into maybe Tigra. Opponent with a Lightstall Inquisitor. Let's see. Yeah, that will slow me down. If I exile Halia, I wouldn't be able to warp her anymore. And then I may not be able to curve out the way I want. I guess I still pick a land here. So then I can still at least warp Halia turn 2. Now we can play another Sanctifier. And no blocks, so opponent might be on mono white auras. Voice of Victory. Could be something else. So land next turn would be great, allowing me to double spell, warping Halia and playing one of our 2-drops. Especially with ley lines. So this is more of a tokens deck here with a Squire. And yeah, they get to pump it up a whole bunch. We'll just block the 1/1s. Alright, land was excellent. So yeah, I think I'm down. Warp Halia. And then maybe start with a Channeler. Can keep Tigra as a surprise. So yeah, the ley lines are in effect. Could get aggressive, but I think I'll play it safe here in case they have a removal spell, so we can hold off the voice so the Squire doesn't get to snowball. And yeah, our opponent scoops it up. Awesome. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw with a keepable hand. Opponent on what looks to be the Graveyard deck, which is a pretty tough matchup, since they'll eventually wipe the board with Bringer of the Last Gift, and we are a creature deck that needs to run creatures into their sweeper, but nope, opponent more of a landfall deck it seems, with a Vine Lasher. So it could still be winnable then. Turn 2, given that we have double Tigra, can maybe play one of those. Not super interested in trading. Could play Tigra now, in case they decide to remove the emissary instead of Tigra. Don't expect them to. So opponent doing some self-milling and eventually getting lands back out of the graveyard to deal a bunch of damage. Vine Lasher stays home. And yeah, Pitiless Carnage combos with cards like Analyst to sacrifice all your lands and then get them back. They might have a Lumra in there as well. No third land, sadly. I guess we'll go Emissary plus Halia to hopefully draw into a land while pumping up Tigra. And yeah, that's a healthy attack for 7. Find Leonardo. Can maybe sneak that into play. Opponent's gonna search for a card in the top 6. Evolving Wilds triggers Vine Lasher twice. Yeah, the trample on Tigra certainly makes a difference here. And we found a land. So can always just replay Halia, which would give us the most immediate life gain triggers. Heroic Feast doesn't look great. Will be better once we have Halia in place, since a food token also triggers Halia, as it's an artifact. So yeah, I think we just go for Halia attack. Hope they don't have instant speed removal left. Doesn't look like it. End of turn we draw again. And then next turn Heroic Feast could be the play. Especially if we draw another 1-mana creature we can deploy. Or maybe we can sneak Leonardo in play. There's Lumra as we suspected. They are running some board wipes as well, so I have to watch out for those. A Lumra a 9/9, so it's going to compete with Tigra. Found a land. So, can make some aggressive attacks if I'd like. Could also just play Leonardo and Pridemate before attacking to get a bunch more life gain triggers. Yeah, don't hate that idea, versus going Heroic Feast in the hopes of sneaking in Leonardo. There's a chance they'll block everything. But nah, I think I kind of like Heroic Feast here. Attack all out, they're kind of forced to block Tigra with Lumra. And then counter on, can make it one of the emissaries. And then now we get to sneak. And our opponent's just dead here, since we'll grow Tigra a bunch more times. We'll get a Heroic Feast trigger as well, ×2 even. So yeah, plenty of extra counters going around. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw. Hand has potential with lots of enablers into a Tigra, depending on the matchup. And Blood Crypt untapped for a Mako, so the Mardu discard deck, presumably. Alright, we'll put a Emissary in play, which can theoretically trade for a Mako. Although I don't think I'm planning to. Should have probably started with a Verge there, since we can make green mana with it. Mako attacks, triggers Cool but Rude. Yeah, since I played the enchantment, trading is more beneficial. So they can't enable it next turn, unless they've got a haste creature. So then I'll just go Emissary plus a white creature here. Make it the bat. And then next turn we want to get Tigra online. Opponent does have a Moonshadow. And then could still get the Starting Town in play if we're worried about tap lanes in the future. Sure. So then I guess we'll go for another Emissary. And then Tigra before damage, so it picks up an extra +1 counter from the life linker. So our best draws here include Heroic Feasts, Halia. More of our 2-mana creatures would be fine. Sheltered by Ghosts, I'm not going to say no to. A Leyline wouldn't be enabled right away, so currently not the best draw, but we can cast it at least. Yeah, hopefully that 1 extra damage I took on turn 1 is not going to end up making the difference. Opponent shocks themselves with Blood Crypt to level up Cool but Rude once again. So they get to tutor a card and discard at random. Possible they searched up the elf, since I would have paired quite well with Cool but Rude here. And now Inti the play. I can double block Moonshadow, and that would be a fine trade for the Emissary. If they also discard with Inti, I suppose it goes up to a 4/4. Unless they discarded a non-land card here, or a non-permanent card I should say. So then Moonshadow doesn't grow. So then a double block would still be fine. But now they also discarded the Academic. Alright, so no longer interested in trading. Although yeah, next turn Practice Defense threatens a lot of damage. They can cast it with Starting Town. Opponent is at 12. I can grow Tigra at least 3 more times, up to 8. So if I draw anything relevant, I could also be threatening lethal myself. And the Heroic Feast is a good one. I'll grow the lifelinker. And attack. They could have survived by trumping, but we also would have gotten 3 more +1 counters from the feast here. I'll take it. On to the next one. Alright, we're on the draw. We've got a hand that could work out, with Heroic Feast and the life-linking Flyers being a good pairing. So, yeah, I'll start there. Facing maybe a 4-color control deck, so can expect some removal. Probably want to make use of my green mana here, since that could be a bottleneck. Or we can try the Essence Channeler, although that might be better next turn. So, could also attack first. We do have Starting Town to give Channeler flying, but against control that's usually not very relevant. It does seem like they have a removal at the ready. Right, they're just going to consult. So yeah, next turn Channeler, or maybe Heroic Feast if we draw land. Could be pretty decent. It looks like it's going to be the Channeler, so have to main phase it if we want to get the extra +1 counters. That resolves. But they might remove it now with a Shoot the Sheriff. Did not have any +1 counters yet, so they timed it properly. Still waiting on a 3rd land, but we do get to descend to look for one. Don't expect Shelter by Ghost to be amazing. Can maybe exile like a Tablet of Discovery. But Heroic Feast could be good against control, since if they have some board wipe, at least we'll still have the enchantment around to grow creatures going forward. And yep, sadly opponent has the answer with Spell Pierce, so we don't get to see it in action. Still hit you for 3. Opponent's gonna shoot the Sheriff again. So we do get to scry with a Rune Lurker, and yeah, Halia is one of our better draws. I can either play her normally, or set up the Warp, so we maybe play around a Sweeper a bit better. Although they didn't seem to have one so far. Yeah, let's still just Warp. See what the response is. Alright, opponent's gonna counter and draw. So, still allows me to play a Ruin Lurker here. And a Leyline of Hope without a 4th land is not gonna cut it. Starting town's not very good here. So at least we're making use of our Scry. Hamlet in a multicolor control deck is always ambitious, but opponent might be more blue-black with green on the splash. Don't have any activated abilities, so opponent can think long and hard about this, but it's not gonna matter. Probably name one of the Air Temple type cards. Our opponent's probably having to Google what the exact name is of certain cards. They can take their time. That's the advantage of playing this effect on Arena compared to paper. You get to maybe search something up. And Basing Say also makes sense. Alright, drew a starting town anyways. So I'm okay trading Emissary for the Great Hall if they want to make that trade. So if they are just sitting on a bunch of counter spells, we're happy. But there's a bargain, so that's why they're splashing green. And yeah, Sweeper could be imminent. I'm just gonna hex the Emissary. And we're not drawing particularly well. They did time it correctly in the sense that they removed Emissary in their turn, so we wouldn't get to descend. Still holding out on Sheltered by Ghosts, in case they do play something worth exiling, but you could also argue that I missed out on a few points of damage by not playing it sooner. Opponent's gonna have a look, take away Sheltered by Ghosts, and another one. Alright. And presumably there's more removal, another Hex. They did take a damage of the Great Hall. And now Tigra's not a bad draw. Played before damage to get an extra counter. Tigra they can block with a Great Hall as a 2/4. So probably not attacking with it yet. So what do we want to draw? A Leyline wouldn't be terrible since we are at 31. Another Halia could be decent. Opponent consulting without kicker, since they're looking for a specific answer, maybe a board wipe. And yeah, digging 7 cards deep makes it pretty likely that they find one, since they haven't played one so far. Another Requiting Hex, is that the last one? And they have one left. Draw another Plains. Can Ruin Lurker Band go the distance? Opponent falls to 2. They might have another Consult here with kicker now. It's gonna be a bargain. So they are actually playing the full set of Duress. And there's the last Hex. Well, our opponent still needs to close out the game somehow. Not sure what their win condition is. Possible they're trying to mill us out. Yeah, our draws have certainly been below average. And now kicked Consults could be the turning point in this game. Aunt May doesn't have any power. Think we wait so we can maybe get some immediate value. Yeah, if I could somehow solve a case to replay creatures out of the graveyard, that would be sweet. I see, Outrageous Robbery for 7 is their win condition. So we're gonna get beaten by our own synergies now. And our opponent's gonna quickly gain a bunch of life to get out of range. And those are all the cards I wanted to draw. And Leonardo, yep. Well, in a way you could argue that our deck is still gonna win, just in the hands of our opponent. They probably have another counterspell in hand. But Pride Maid is not a must counter. Another Consult with Kicker. So they've probably seen most of their deck by now. They might have another Outrageous Robbery in there somewhere. Because only one copy is a bit light for a win condition. I guess you can always animate the Great Hall. And Leonardo, I guess we'll play. But yeah, this game has ended a couple turns ago. So we've seen all the cards they exiled. And next turn they are threatening a lethal. And Great Hall animates ×2. And another Shoot the Sheriff. Alright, GG's. And that'll do it. On to the next one. Alright, we're on the draw. This hand is pretty interesting. Double leyline, just have one creature. If I draw any second creature, this hand could work out quite well. If I don't, then we might get kinda rolled over if they just answer my one creature I have in play. I think it's worth it, just to see what happens. But there is certainly a fail rate. One on blue-red, Ruin Lurker, a decent draw. So might want to start there over Aunt May. Although if I have to choose for one of them to get removed, I guess I would rather keep the bat to combo with Heroic Feast, since I can immediately grow it the turn we play it. Now SS Channeler, so opponent could have all sorts of interaction up here, Lightning Helix, No More Lies. But Channeler would still be kind of the straightforward play. They're gonna counter it. So I still have my bat to maybe enable Heroic Feast. But Jeskai Control is always going to be a tough matchup for a creature deck. Opponent's immediately going to sear the bat, doesn't let me untap. Halia was quite the draw. Couple ways I can sequence. I kind of like Aunt May warp Halia, or we can just cast her. But by warping, I enable the leyline a few more times. So we've got a +4/+4 bonus now. So it's going to be harder for them to burn my creatures going forward. So seeing the payoff for keeping a double leyline hand. Now of course sweepers like Day of Judgment don't care about how large my creatures get. But yeah, Halia can maybe sustain a bit of card advantage, while we're also dealing a good chunk of damage. Alright, Sanctifier the draw. So I can go Sanctifier plus Channeler, or we can go for Halia. Yeah, I think we double spell here. If they do Day of Judgment, at least they would waste the mana, so it's not the most mana efficient play they can make. And whereas Halia they can maybe handle with a 1/1 removal a bit better. Heroic Feast can help play around a board wipe by still adding to the board without losing it to a sweeper, but yeah. Opponent with a Get Lost, so they might have two of those, since I do get to move the counters as well. So for opponent passes, they could have a counterspell for Halia, so then I would rather go exploring with a map. If I play Heroic Feast, I don't gain life right away, so then I wouldn't be threatening lethal. So yeah, I think sacking a map here is reasonable. but it does seem like they have something other than a counterspell. Lightning Helix can gain them 3 life, but wouldn't be an amazing play on their part, so that's fine. Alright, opponent's just going to consult, so this is potentially 12 or 13 damage coming across. Emissary, I don't need to prioritize. Yeah, wouldn't actually mind a land here. And then the question is, do I play the Emissary? They can Jeskai Revelation me. They did just cast a Consult, so I think I do hang on to the Emissary to play around a sweeper now. Alright, sweet, and that'll do it. So yeah, we got to see this green-white Lifegain deck in action. It's not particularly well positioned in the meta at the moment, mostly due to the impact of Banjo Cub on the format, since against the Banjo decks they're usually a little bit more explosive and can go over the top of our Lifegain synergies, and then decks that aren't playing Banjo Cub are often more controlling strategies with lots of board wipes. Even the Graveyard deck has kind of the combo with Bringer of the Last Gift to wipe the board, and that's going to be pretty rough for a creature deck that needs its board presence to get the synergies going. So overall, I wouldn't recommend this at the moment, but it is still a fun Lifegain deck if you enjoy the playstyle. So yeah, that's going to do it for today's gameplay. Want to thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a nice day.